I've actually prepared to read the whole text to you from Exodus chapter 3, but to be honest with you, I'm not going to read all that just for the sake of boring you. But I want to focus on two verses. I'm going to read verses 7 through 8 especially. And these lines were uttered in this clip I showed you. The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. I can't tell you how many times I have read this story and never really thought about the response of God. How Israel had been languishing in pain and suffering, waiting on a response from a distant God, or a God that seemed distant, who possibly had forgotten about them. A God who responded. Not some, mundane way, but something almost miraculous. Let's focus on the verbs of this passage today, at least these two verses. And it kind of gives us an insight of what's going on in the story, how God responds to us. Notice verse 7 says, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. Give you a bit of backstory. If you're not familiar with the story of Moses, which most of y'all probably are, especially chapter 1 and chapter 2, chapter 1 especially, we find that Genesis left off where Joseph was a leader and the people were blessed and the Israelites had a high status in the land. But Exodus begins where there's a new king and Joseph and his leadership had been forgotten. The people were made slaves. We look over in chapter 1, they were told that they had taskmasters put over them. In fact, verse 13, chapter 1 says, so they ruthlessly made the people work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and all the kinds of work in the field. And all their work they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. A people who were free, who had leadership and high positions, were now slaves. Lowest of the low, doing hard manual labor. They couldn't go home. They couldn't go back. They weren't free. Not only that, we find that things got a little worse going on later in chapter 1. We find that the Pharaoh, who's never named, decided that the people were becoming too numerous. Someone had to go. We find over in chapter 1, verse 22, that the Pharaoh commanded all the people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. The boys were killed. God saw this affliction. God saw this pain. The death of the boys, the whippings by the taskmasters, the hard labor, the lack of freedom. God saw it. See, there's nothing that can be hidden from God's view. God sees things that even we sometimes think don't matter. God saw it all for the Egyptians, for the Hebrews in Egypt. God sees our sufferings too. God sees our life on this earth. It's not all roses. It's not all happy, happy, joy, joy. It's not all puppy dogs and rainbows. But life gets sometimes downright hard. God sees that. God sees that. No matter how insignificant we think we are in the grand scheme of things, however small of a cog we think we are in the big wheel, the big machine, God sees it. God sees that you're hurt. God sees. There's a lot of people that suffer in silence. A lot of people with depression especially that try to hide it. And they suffer in silence. But God sees. There's a lot of people in abusive relationships that try to hide the scars and hide the abuse, the psychological and physical abuse. God sees and God knows. God sees. Many of us that are going through trials of life know how low our bank accounts are, or how in the red we are, how we struggle from week to week to make ends meet. God sees that. even when nobody else does. Even we may put on a good show, God sees. You see, we hurt. God sees it. Nothing can be hidden from Him. He sees things that, like I said, we think don't matter. God sees. But He has a tender gaze. He sees the heartaches. He sees the tears. He sees the burdens. And He still loves us. He still cares for us. And He responds. But He sees, but notice also, the second part of the verse there, He hears. And have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. You see, we suffer on this earth. We go through trials. We go through pain. We languish in agony. And we pray. We reach out to God. God, help me. Like I've mentioned before, some of my favorite psalms are the psalms where the psalmist is praying out to God in pain and agony. God, how long? How long, O Lord? There's a predatory psalm, just this reek of frustration and hurt. Many of us pray the same prayer. God, how long will this pain be in my life? God, how long will this physical ailment hurt me and harm me? God, how long do I have to put up with this abusive relationship? God, how long until maybe I can stop living week by week, paycheck by paycheck? God, how long? We cry out to God, He hears them. Israel was under unbearable working conditions. The children were being killed. They cried out to God. I'm sure many of them, many of the Hebrews, they thought that God wasn't going to answer. It had been a few years. Where's God now? Where's God now? In fact, even one of the psalmist says, the people cry, where's your God now? We cry out to God today because of these shootings that have happened recently. In fact, 2 shootings in less than 14 hours. 20 dead on one occasion in El Paso, Texas, and 9, possibly 10 dead in Dayton, Ohio, last I checked. 3 last week killed in Gilroy, California. We cry out to God, how long, O Lord? We cry out. In fact, I've even, in response to some of the other shootings, I've even had some people say to me, where's God in all this? God is kind, God is just, God is loving, according to your words. Where is God when all these shootings are happening? And I respond, God sees, God hears, and God will act. And I sometimes wonder, God, how long is this going to go on? The pain in my life, the pain in others, the pain in our land. We get discouraged. We cry out in a prayer. And sometimes our tears and our prayers go on for so long, we say, even what's the use, God? What's the use? You ain't listening to me. I'm nothing. You don't care about me. But we get it wrong. Just as Israel cried loudly, called for God, and maybe thought He had left them, He said, I have heard their cry. Even when we think our prayers are going unanswered, God listens. And my children are trying to figure this whole prayer thing out. And in fact, I had a conversation with you last week about, or actually last night, about prayer. You know, is God going to heal so-and-so? So, buddy, you know, I don't know. I don't know. You see, God answers in multiple ways. Usually it can be yes, no, or not yet. And if you're anything like me, impatient, you want that yes to be now, and you want it now. But God sometimes will say no. Because the thing is, even though we want things our way, God knows a little bit more than we do. He's Almighty God. His pay grade's a little higher than ours. He sees the whole grand scheme of things and what's best for a certain situation, even when we can only see a little small myopic part. And we cry, God, do something now. God's saying, maybe no, maybe yes, or maybe not yet, maybe in the future. We cry out to Him, but He does listen. He hears our prayers, no matter how insignificant they may seem. But notice, not only does God see, He hears, He knows. You You see, God had measured all the tears of the Egyptians. I'm sure He knew every stripe from every whip the Hebrews had. He knew the pain. At the end of the day, He knew their sorrows. In fact, we find in the New Testament, even God the Son experienced some of the suffering, some of the pain, some of the temptations that we experience. Jesus Christ, God the Son, has been there. He experienced death. He experienced sorrow, friends dying. He experienced temptation, the wilderness scene, 40 days in the wilderness. He experienced physical pain and suffering on the way to the cross. God knows, God can empathize with us in this life. God knows. God knows how we hurt. Even if we don't know exactly what's going on, God knows. I know there's sorrows. I know there's sufferings. God sees, God hears, God knows. But getting back to the whole customer service response thing, you know, you can complain all day about service you get at a restaurant or a store, whatever, and be like me and not expect a response. They can hear you, they can see you, they can know all about it. But guess what? God is not such a God that just lets it go. God is a God who responds. You see, He responded to the Israelites, the Hebrews. It says, "And I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, a place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites." All the ites, right? Not only does God know what's going on, not only does God see what's going on and hear what's going on, but God does something about it. God is not dead, nor doth He sleep, right? As the hymn song goes. God does. God acts. In response to our prayers, in response to our aches, and our pains, and our suffering, and our cries, God responds. God responded to the Hebrews. He came down. He delivered compassion that became action. He delivered them from slavery. Now, it wasn't exactly what they wanted. They had this languish in a land, a desert land, and eat manna. Which, by the way, the lady that filled the pulpit when I was going on vacation, June Hobbs, June has this theory that the manna in the wilderness was fried okra. You ever heard that theory? You know, you can eat it one day and it's good, but you say for the next day it wasn't good. That's fried okra. So, I don't think that's very theologically correct, but oh well. But God cared for the Israelites. Not the way they wanted, not the way they expected, but God did something. God rescued them. God doesn't always take us out of a situation of pain and suffering on easy street. It may hurt like the dickens to get us where we need to be, but He does do something. He does do something. Life isn't easy. Life is hard. We hurt. But God knows it. God sees it, God hears it, and God responds. But you know what? God sent the Israelites Moses. Verse 10 talks about that. And God says, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." We'll talk a little bit more next week about the call of Moses. But notice that God sent someone to help someone else. There are many people in this church family that are hurting. There are many people in our community that are hurting. Many people that have their burdens that they can barely bear if they're even bearing it at all. A lot of people have sins that are burdening them so much that they're being tempted to take their own life. So what is our responsibility? We need to be like Moses and go out and proclaim deliverance. Remind people that there is a God who knows. He's been there. He's done that. He sees and He's heard your pains. And He can deliver you. He can take you out of your horrible situation, us being the hands and the feet if we need to. God can deliver us from the sin of life. God knows and God sees and God does. And God also uses us to help be those deliverers, those voice boxes telling others about Him. You see, Israel, the Hebrews, they were in a bad situation. God brought them out. We, as modern Christians in America, we have some bad situations going on. God can deliver us. It requires us being, though, sometimes the messengers, the Moseses, the hands and the feet to help those that need a special touch. God acts and God works. I'm going to show you a little video, interesting story of a lady who, she could be beating herself up and living an oh, woe is me life. Many of us get in that rut, don't we? Oh, woe is me. Get those ruts. But with God, we can do so much more.
I was born in April of 1975 with the condition known as Golden Heart Syndrome. It affects people in different ways, but it causes cardiovascular disorders. In my case, I was born without a right ear, lung, or bone. In addition, I am missing some